What it do, what it do. This is the Brothers on Books podcast, where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. If you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. And lastly, for the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. And even lastly, we're on Instagram at Brothers on Books and on Twitter at B_O_B_podcast. Once again, that's a mouthful. And I am Jack Allweil, and with me as always is my brother and co-host, Alex Allweil. Al, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jack. How are you?
Doing pretty fantastic, because I am here discussing a book with you on a Monday night. And
I have to say, when we were talking off kilter, it sounded like you had a pretty good day as you were in depth, describing to me a variety of different soccer games.
One soccer game. I described one soccer game.
I guess you got, you have that going for you, which I do not.
I worked hard, and I might have had the soccer game on in the background. So yeah. So what are we discussing today, Al?
Today we are talking about the book "The Coddling of the American Mind" by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. I guess I picked this book. I've heard Jonathan Haidt speak just on YouTube a lot. I always really enjoy listening to him talk. Just a quick background on Jonathan. He was born and raised in New York City and then raised in Scarsdale, which I believe is just outside. Received his BA in philosophy from Yale, did a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, studies cultural psychology, and he eventually went on to be an assistant professor at University of Virginia. And then I believe he is now a professor at NYU, mainly teaching at the business school. So I guess with that said, let's just get into it. Jack, what'd you think of the book?
I thought it was pretty good. I'm grateful for the upbringing we had. I will say that, because they talk a lot about just how kids being on devices and watching TV is hindering their progress. And I feel like we had a pretty good upbringing where we had a lot of unsupervised playtime and were pretty independent, actually. And I remember thinking sometimes when we would go to like the party store, so we would ride our bikes like the 5 miles to the party store. I didn't really think we were that young, but I remember some of our neighbors like questioning, like, wait, your parents are okay with that? So I don't know. I'm happy the way we grew up, and I'm gonna take some of these learnings from this book when I am a father, hopefully one day.
Yeah, I guess as I was reading this, I was thinking, honestly, one of the thoughts I had was kudos to mom and dad, because I feel like they, obviously, without knowing anything of what this guy was saying, I feel like they sort of followed his philosophies pretty well.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the party store, I think we were riding our bikes there, not even the party store, but we would ride the Dutch Village and play mini golf by ourselves and go to Muscle Beach, which would have been...
That was in middle school, I think, the first time we did, or at least I did that.
Yeah, but still, I mean, that was pretty far. I mean, he was talking in the book, he was saying how some of these parents are saying, like, if a kid's under 16, they shouldn't be like almost left alone, which seemed pretty insane to me. Yeah, I definitely remember us having a lot of free playtime just with the two of us and some of the neighbor kids, where we got up to, God knows what.
Making forts in the woods, Al.
we did make a lot of forts in the woods. I have fond memories of climbing trees, just sort of aimlessly riding my bike around.
And trading Pokemon cards, I guess, is still good. in the grand scheme of things, I guess.
That's true. And mom paid us to paint things in Pokemon cards, which I think at one point I went back for a per hour rate and figured out that she was paying us like $3 an hour or something. So, good on her for being the businesswoman that she is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I guess what were some of your main, I guess, takeaways from this?
I like how they started out the book with these three untruths that were kind of the backdrop for the whole book. I guess we can talk one by one. The they're basically bringing up these three bad ideas that kids have kind of grasped onto and kind of lean on as they operate in the world. So the first untruth they give is the untruth of fragility. What doesn't kill you makes you weaker. And they actually talk about Nassim Taleb in his book Anti-Fragile.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting. They brought that up, and I guess like you can think of something that like a glass that you can, if you drop it, it'll break. That's something that's fragile. Like a plastic cup would be, I guess, durable, where it doesn't like break or shatter when you drop it. But like they're making the argument that kids are anti-fragile, meaning a little bit of stress and these little stressors over time make you actually stronger. So that's kind of what Talib is getting at, and they're saying the first great untruth is what doesn't kill you makes you weaker.
Well, I think it's also because he does at one point when he talks about the two different parenting styles, which I think we can probably at some point talk about. He does go into the difference between like chronic little stressors versus sort of periodic stressors. And he does say that like chronic stress, even if it's like small, is not good. So I think he's talking about the difference between like almost lower class kids and like the parenting styles that they're associated with versus sort of the upper class, very sort of directed parenting styles where the kids like lives and like days are planned out. And I guess from some of his theories of just sort of the you get more free time, you're able to sort of explore. You would think that some of the lower like socioeconomical kids would do better, but he brings up that a lot of those kids come from families that have a lot of chronic stress, which is I think very detrimental. So I guess the way I always think about like anti-fragile is sort of in lifting weights, where you lift a little bit, you need to push yourself a little bit, right? To get muscle growth. But if you push yourself too much and you rip something or break something, that is very bad. I guess I don't know.
No, that's a good analogy.
Those were kind of my thoughts. So like it's always like climbing. You need to do some type of activity that challenges you, but not something that's so challenging it feels almost overwhelming, I guess. Okay. I think for that one, the one that I found really interesting is the peanut allergy that he was talking about, and how kind of the peanut allergy is kind of almost cyclical, because schools become so afraid of having peanuts, no one becomes exposed to them, and then that prompts kids to develop almost more peanut allergies because they never get exposed to the peanut protein, which for the most part is harmless if they were just originally exposed to it in low doses. But then when you're not exposed, you develop the allergy, I guess. And I think I don't have the numbers written down, but they did some study where if you had no exposure, your likelihood of developing the allergy was like, I think 20 or 30% higher. So I guess those were my thoughts on the first great untruth.
And there was a good quote that summarized like how you should go about, I guess, treating a kid. And they the wisdom was prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child.
Child. Yeah.
So I like that quote. That might be the one quote I would take away from the book, honestly. The second great untruth of emotional reasoning is always trust your feelings. And
Yeah.
I guess
go with your gut.
so. Yeah, that's what a lot of people say.
And what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I was just gonna read like the wisdom words in the background on this were your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded. But once mastered, no one can help you as much, not even your father or your mother. So, I mean, yeah, I guess if you always go with your gut, I mean, I don't know. Like,
I guess for this one, I think this a lot of times goes into, for me personally, I feel like this goes into a lot of sort of how society, like, I thought of this in terms of how a lot of people feel like society should be set up, uh, which is like you feel like everyone should have access to all these things and everyone should be able to do all this, whatever it is. But that isn't necessarily like, and not that everyone should have access to, given X, Y, or Z. It's just that if you allow everyone to have access to it, or if you just make everything free, it doesn't necessarily become better. And I think a lot of times, especially when I guess, argue with some of my friends, I feel like they struggle to see that point that I'm trying to make, that just allowing everyone to have, or just giving everyone things, or doesn't necessarily always make, you have to have a decrease in the quality of the good, I guess is what I'm saying. Uh, and that, I think, reduces the quality to society as a whole. Uh, so that's how I sort of was viewing this. But
and I also think they talk a lot about how, like, if someone just says something to you or says something in general, I mean, I guess if it could be construed as racist or sexist, but you don't know, because like that's what your gut might say, but you don't know what the intent of the other person is. And they go into this book a lot between the difference between like intent and then like the actual impact.
yeah,
And
I
the
think
intent does matter.
I think
So
when he was when he talks on YouTube a lot, he talks about how whenever he's discussing with someone, he feels like you should always give them the benefit of the doubt, that they're not
right.
trying to insult you. But it seems like the common norm into, for at least younger society or the younger generation, is that uh, you take people take offense. And to be fair, I mean, if you want to take offense, you'll always be able to take offense regardless of what anyone says.
Yeah.
Having recently been out of a university, I felt like there were a lot of people that would just, regardless, just take offense almost.
So, oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it was the minority that would sort of hear you out for what you're trying to say, and just, immediately say, like, that's wrong. It shouldn't be like that.
So they kind of bring up this like inflection point in the universities. I think it was like 2015. They kind of talk about. So did you see a difference on like University of Michigan's campus versus Vanderbilt's when you were going to grad school? And
Yes.
I guess you graduated Michigan in 2013, and then when did you start Vanderbilt?
2016. I felt like there was I mean, it's possible that it was just, I feel like it was possible that it was just, like, I was different, but I felt like there was a massive difference in how sensitive everyone was.
Mhm.
And I think maybe, I will say, I think people, maybe that did have something to do with Trump. Like, people on universities regardless of what they may say, and he talks about it in the book, how the majority of university professors, especially in social science or humanities and social sciences, are far left leaning. They really, in my experience, disliked Trump when I was at least at Vanderbilt when I was there. Uh, and I felt like that was a very like almost a lightning rod, and like everyone just sort of, near the end of my grad school, when I became sort of closer with some of the other people would tell me that they were, much more conservative than they would let on. But for the most part, the people that were conservative would not speak up and voice their opinion.
Mhm. Yeah,
So yeah,
they talk a lot about how the idea of a university is to like get the truth. So you want like to be exposed to all sides of an argument. And they kind of acknowledge that there's been more liberals in general. And the ratios are pretty
astonishing.
staggering. It was
Yeah,
the ratio of left leaning professors to right leaning professors was, well, relatively okay for a long time. Looks like it was
it's
around
like 4 to 1.
it was 2 to 1 in 1996. By 2011 it was 5 to 1. And so there is a lack of diversity in the professors, it looks like.
Wait, so is that the that was overall professors, correct?
Yeah, at least conducted in the survey.
Because I think I at least heard him talk once where he then goes into the social sciences and humanities, and it was closer to like 20 to 1.
Yeah. And they also said it's way worse like in the New England area, and I think on like in California too.
I mean, I remember I was listening to. I mean, it's like hard to even like believe that this guy has a job, but I was listening to Peter Schiff debate a professor Richard Wolff, who I believe is at Amherst, and he's a professor of economics, and he is a proud Marxist. Uh, it's like hard to believe that person has a job, at least in my opinion. I mean,
Well, I guess as long as they balance it out, so the students can have like, one Marxist professor, one, Austrian economics or blah, blah, blah.
so that actually brings me to my next point is that I'm blanking on the guy's name, but there was a chemistry professor who is a oh man, I can't remember his name, who is a proud libertarian, and like on his Twitter page, like voiced listed himself as like a student of Austrian economics. And I remember my mentor, like for some reason we were looking at this and he just started like laughing at the guy and calling libertarians sort of stupid. And what is like Austrian economics? I mean, he had no idea, but it's sort of like in many regards, I'd say somewhat ignorant, but it is what it is, I guess.
Okay, well, here's a question. Well, I know the authors kind of, well, not kind of, they said how they voted, but while you were reading it, did you think they were more left or more right?
So I actually would have said I felt like they were more right leaning, but they both said that they voted Democrat.
Yeah, they said they had never voted well, they said they never voted for a Republican president, I think is what,
Right.
or, but yeah, I was a little surprised by that too.
But
But
I mean,
kind of
you have
interesting.
to. I think it has to do with the changing, the changing society. I feel like they were born in the '60s. I feel like probably, you know, Democrats and I guess when they would have been able to vote '80s and '90s are probably the equivalent of Republicans today, or I guess conservatives. Uh, I wouldn't say they're by no means well far left leaning. They both seemed relatively moderate to me,
Hmm.
at least from their opinion, like their opinions.
Yeah, yeah.
I got the impression that uh, they didn't like Trump, which is
Hmm.
fine. It's whatever. Um, for I guess I felt like some of his rhetoric, which is
Hmm.
also fine. Uh,
So
so yeah,
the great untruth, the third untruth was the untruth of us versus them. Life is a battle between good people and evil people. And I guess I'll start us off. There was a quote saying, "Free speech and the ability to tolerate offense are the hallmarks of a free and open society." That was the third untruth, where I guess a lot of the students are very, you're either with us or you're against us. There's no gray area. There's no in between.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I felt like there was back to the, my experiences at university later in my life, I felt like there was a whole lot of this. And even with some of my like closer friends, it just seems like so many things. It just seems like so many things become like hyper generalized, like, statements that were like, you know, one of my friends in grad school made a statement like, I don't understand how, like, it started with how any minority could vote for Trump. And it's how any self-respecting woman could vote for Trump. How, like, you know, it's like, well, it's just like such a, it's just like such a hard line in the sand. I mean, you don't understand how anyone like that isn't, I don't know. I just felt like maybe you should go talk to someone that isn't you, or talk to someone that voted for Trump and like see if they're a woman or a minority, like why did they do it? Like, you know.
yeah.
But and then sort of on other notes, I mean, I felt like, when I would talk, I guess when I would sort of argue for business, people a lot of times would be like, businesses don't care about their employees, like big businesses don't care about their employees, like they're just out to, like milk these employees for everything they're worth. And they don't really, the thing I feel like people always forgot is that like businesses provide like goods, and like, yeah, they're providing those people for the job, even if it's not a great job. And I don't know, it just seemed like they were very much hating, like without really understanding,
Yeah.
which always really, really annoyed me.
Mhm.
Uh, it's surprising. I got into so many of these arguments. You would think that did I ever actually do any work? But the majority of these arguments took place in my last year of grad school when I wasn't doing a whole lot anyway. But so it is.
Okay.
It's kind of like you and watching soccer during the work week.
Yeah, and you're doing riffraff in the lab.
Yeah. I don't really, unfortunately, don't get it. I mean, these arguments are sort of what I lived for in my last year, or really my last like 6 months of grad school. It's what got me through the day. I would just, I would set up a couple of reactions, putz around, and then look for someone to argue with, and it's a great time. So yeah. So do you have any thoughts on that great untruth?
I mean, all this kind of like goes or like weaves together. I mean, I was kind of thinking of just like how, I mean, they talk a little bit later about how some of the students started trying to block certain speakers from speaking on campus. And it's they and once again, this is also back to the like intent and impact and um like actually the feeling of safety, like being like a physical thing versus like a lot of the kids that, well, the authors say that like safety is almost like an emotional thing for them, where like these speakers words could be construed as violence, and therefore I guess they have a right to defend, their university from this person coming down on them with their violence of words. And
Right, but it became like, the word microaggression,
yeah.
which was, they were using the thought of a microaggression with the retaliation of a macroaggression. And I think the most probably known one is when Milo Yiannopoulos was, a riot almost happened at Berkeley when Milo Yiannopoulos was trying to speak. And I mean, have you ever listened to Milo Yiannopoulos talk?
I have not. I'm definitely going to though.
So he's a very interesting individual. So for one, he's very conservative, and two, he's flamboyantly gay, which people a lot of times don't think, those two things go together. But he's also a troll, and he's just, for the most part, he just wants to provoke people. So he makes very provocative statements and just riles up, usually, liberals for fun. And not only that, but when he went to Berkeley to give that talk, I think it was in 2017, he pretty much said that was his goal, was just to rile up liberals to make them look stupid. And they made it pretty easy for him, because they then rioted, and like, I don't remember how much damage.
I wrote it down, actually. It was so much. It said it's 1,500 students came to protest, and damage was in excess of $500,000.
Yeah, and I feel like then Berkeley set a bad precedent when they didn't, one, prosecute anyone, or two, reprimand any of the students for doing that.
Yeah.
And there were some like legitimate assaults. Like,
I mean,
I think
that I did look up on YouTube, that riot. I mean,
yeah, it's insane.
yeah, people just, there was a guy getting interviewed and someone just comes up behind him and maces him in the face.
Yeah, it's just absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Um, Probably the other most notable one would have been the evergreen. I don't even know what you would call it. When I don't exactly remember what. Well, the other fun tidbit of Evergreen is I remember my mentor's daughter went to Evergreen, and I remember in one meeting he was telling me how Evergreen was such a great school, and they developed their kids to think deeply and about all of these different thoughts, unlike the school that I went to. So whatever. We at least had grades. Evergreen, to my knowledge, was a pass-fail college. And you just, I guess, sat in a circle and talked about your feelings. You also apparently sat in a circle and like abducted your professors.
Yeah.
So
Yelled at them.
you yelled at them and threatened them through intimidation to essentially resign because you disagreed with what they were saying. I remember when I was reading this, it's just, I mean, the thoughts that, I don't know what you're thinking, but the thoughts that are going through my mind is, these people are like so weak almost, that they can't deal with anyone that disagrees with them. Like,
Yeah.
how do you honestly go through life if you're not able to cope with someone disagreeing with your point of view?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like go find something really to like worry, like go get a life.
Right. Yeah. Like, just go do something. Don't just like sit around and complain or be insulted all day.
Yeah.
I don't know. Every time when I was reading those stories about the colleges and the students sort of getting upset about something like the administrator would say or a professor would say, I mean, I felt, I felt always bad for the administrator or the professor, but I also felt like sort of angry that no one would stand up to the student, like the student mob, and tell them to
Yeah.
be, almost just tell them to shut up and grow up. Like, this is pathetic.
Yeah, and it's
Uh,
kind of sad that some of the professors would like kind of
Bow down.
help the professors privately, but publicly they wouldn't support like the
Right.
administration or
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, and yeah, they're kind of, they're afraid to lose their
Mindless.
jobs.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, it is their, the way they put food on the table, as they say.
Right.
So
But as a professor, if you're tenured, uh, you have to do a lot to get fired.
yeah, well, some of them aren't, and it's also comes down. Well, I don't know if it directly, but it's this idea that college has kind of become like a luxury product, and like, in capitalism or whatever you want to call it, customer service 101, like a lot of times they say like the customer is always right. So like a lot of times they kind of want to cater to the customer, and the student is the customer in a lot of these setups.
Yeah, that's true.
So
But I mean, I I sort of agree. Like the point of college at one point, I felt like was to get people to sort of like out on their own and to be able to think for themselves and to kind of like mature them as adults and to be able to like figure out what what you want to do with your life. And yeah, now I kind of feel like the point of college is just as a almost certification, like just you have to go get a college degree to get a lot of jobs, which I don't think you necessarily should need for a lot of the jobs that require them.
Mhm.
And the kids, I don't think the kids learn a lot in a lot of these courses or degrees. And all in all, I think it's for the most part a waste of time. Um, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about this. Like, if you were 18, would you still go to college?
Um, I think I might, but maybe not directly after high school. I did think some of the ideas in this book kind of said, well, if it seems like kids are growing up slower, and I feel like even the generation before us, I mean, they say like our generation is like growing up slower than the prior. So like maybe it is beneficial. Well, if that's the case, well, maybe you should push out college. Maybe you should go, take that gap year, go work a little bit in the real world before going to college. And that I might have. But I mean, right now there are a lot of ways to make money without going to college. So I would definitely take a hard look at it.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if your point is just to go make money, I don't think. I guess the way I would put it is there are some fields I think you'll always need to go to some type of higher learning. I think probably both of the fields that you and I are in, lawyers, doctors, engineers. I think you're going to need it. But outside of that, you know, I think just on the job experience is a lot more valuable than a college degree. It's
Mhm.
just about getting, I think, someone to take a chance on you.
Yeah.
Um,
What did you
yeah.
think of there was part of the book that was titled "How did we get here?" So like what were the things that led to kids acting in such a way and us seeing these things on college campuses?
Yes.
Um, Go
So
ahead.
so he listed six,
Hmm.
right? Six threads, and I have those written down. So he has the polarization cycle as the first, anxiety and depression, paranoid parenting, decline of play, the bureaucracy of safetyism, and then the quest for justice. So the polarization cycle started with usually people on, I believe he would say, people on the right saying something somewhat provocative off campus, like off of campuses, or doing something provocative off campuses, and then having a hyper reaction to it on college campuses. Sort of like, what we were talking about with like Milo coming to Berkeley or, that Evergreen incident.
Hmm.
Uh, he did bring up that no one. I think the Evergreen professor was Brett Weinstein, and he brought up that someone I think made was going. I don't want to get this wrong, but I believe someone was going from New York to Washington to try with the intent of trying to kill him. I don't even really remember what he said or did to cause this great uproar. But I mean, he also brings up these, you know, he brings up a lot of the alt right people that in those terrible acts that took place. I think the ones at Charleston with the neo Nazis, and then
I think Charlottesville they bring up.
sorry, Charlottesville, not
Yeah.
Charleston. And then whenever that guy shot up the black, I believe it was the Black Baptist Church.
Oh, that I think that one was in Charleston.
Oh, that was in Charleston.
Yeah,
Okay, so I didn't get
I
those
think
wrong.
that was in Charleston. Yep.
And it's like how those two things kind of feed off each other and makes I guess students need to feel like especially like minority students, need to feel like they're safe on campus. I mean, there were definitely some very, I thought, humorous stories. I mean, they would be humorous kind of if they weren't so sad, where, you know, someone was wearing, I think he said like a monk was on a campus with wearing like a hood,
Hmm.
and someone said like a KKK member was on campus and like everyone was freaking out, and you know, it ended up just being a monk walking around. Um, so yeah,
I
I
mean,
guess what were you?
the interesting part about this was they showed that there's a graph in there about they answered. There was some survey. Let me see, by the Pew Research Center, and there was like 10 policy questions, and they were like showing like the percentage answered in such a way over like gender, age, education level, and a lot of those division factors, like it was pretty like stable since like I think it was 1994. Yeah, 1994. And but like by Democrat versus Republican, it's like really different. It's really deviating. So it kind of emphasizes that there's like real polarization going on.
Yeah, so the next one, the anxiety and depression, I thought like the next three threads I found uh sort of, I guess, going into our original discussion about our parents, but I found those to be the most three interesting. So like what was causing, it was mainly like an increase in depression in young females, and like
Mm-hmm.
why that is. And you know, they blame it on social media, and he kind of goes into the different types of bullying that kids face, where boys face more like physical bullying,
Yep.
where girls face more of like sort of verbal bullying. And how, you know, if you're getting like picked on the playground as a kid, you know, when you get home, like the bully can't, you know, get to you because you're in your house. But if you're getting, and that would be sort of more of as a boy, but if, as a girl, you know, you have a pack of girls like calling you names, you have a Facebook profile, or I mean an Instagram or whatever. When you get home, like they can continue just messaging you like hateful things and doing
Mm-hmm.
all this sort of like awful things. And he kind of links that to why this depression rate in young women has increased so much. um, yeah,
Yeah.
do you have
Yeah, this
any
is
thoughts on that?
pretty eye-opening, honestly. Like if you ask me, do I think females are more aggressive or males? I would definitely say males. But they kind of said, well, it's actually about the same. It's just a different type. Men are more like, yeah, physically aggressive, but women go after like your relationships or your status. And it's, yeah, more of like an emotional bullying. And that was pretty eye-opening to
So
see
this,
some of those stats.
yeah, it's more like passive aggressive attacks where they're,
Yeah.
you know, spreading, who knows, spreading rumors, like trying to destroy your character, um,
I mean, and
but
then
not.
they brought up, well, two activities that are significantly correlated with depression and other suicide related outcomes. And those, now they actually didn't, I don't think they increased it like a ton, but they were statistically significant. And the two were electronic device use and watching TV. So that was kind of, and I think they defined it as like more than 2 hours a day, I think.
Yeah, he
As
said under 2 hours a day uh, for TV was okay, and I think he also said like, I think he said like productive screen time was also for the most part fine, but because I think he said like boys a lot of times would be playing like games on their
mhm.
screens, like, but the girls would be like on social media looking at like pictures of models, or you know, things that just, I don't know. Have you like, I don't, you don't personally have an Instagram, correct?
No.
Yeah, me
Well,
neither.
actually, our sister might have made me one, but that was a long
Right,
time
right.
ago. I don't know.
Right. Like I don't know. Have you ever gone on like some of those Instagram pages and like looked at some of those, I guess those like Instagram influencers and like looked at how they look? Because
Not really. Oh, I mean, I've started like going on just a little bit just because we have Brothers on Books Instagram, but I don't really look at other people's stuff much.
yeah, I mean I mean, just go look at some of those like Instagram influencers. I mean, it would almost be impossible. I feel like it's impossible to look like that unless that's your full-time job, at least how a lot of them look. Uh, and yeah, I think that would make a lot of people that are sort of young and impressionable kind of upset that they don't look like that. Like they don't look
Mhm.
like how a lot of these models look, or just anything. Um,
So I guess on the flip side, so yeah, so they're showing these rise in depression and anxiety rates in the 2010s, and so they brought up the two factors that increase those depression rates and whatnot. They brought up five activities that have an inverse relationship though, and those are sports, attending religious services, reading, in-person social interactions, and doing homework. So I guess it is not all doom and gloom. Just limit the screen time and go and play, I guess.
yeah. Springs, I think we had I think mom and dad like didn't allow us to watch, or they allow us to watch like an hour of TV as kids or something.
Yeah, not a lot.
Not a lot, you're right.
Um,
So yeah. So the next thread was paranoid parenting. And I thought this one was really interesting because as I was reading this, I was just by happenstance talking to some of the people I play pickleball with, and they were talking to me about all these abductions and how like things were so unsafe. And I sort of thought it was interesting that it tied into this, but it was like sort of helicopter parents,
mhm.
and you know definitely a couple of my friends ring a bell when I would think of like parents that were overbearing and how it sort of stifles. I don't know. I feel like it stifles the child a little bit. Um,
Yeah, I think they do a good like history lesson in the book because there was a family whose kid actually did get abducted and missing forever. And I think that family's the one that started
the milk cards,
the milk cartons exactly.
right?
And that kind of
Spiraled
I yeah,
because
it caused people to think things were maybe a little worse than they actually
worse.
were.
Yeah, I feel like we talk about, well, I feel like I bring this up to Elena a lot. If you just constantly have the news on, the news for the most part is only reporting, I would say, bad things. Like you think everything is awful.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, like so. Plus, the other statistic he brought up was the kidnappings for that one child. I think it was like over 99% of kidnappings were either one, uh, a like a divorced spouse taking their child when they didn't have custody, or the kid running away. So the vast minority, and like not to downgrade like the small amount of kidnappings that happen, like actual like bad kidnappings that happen. I think he gave an actual number in the book, which was like surprisingly low. I think it was between like 15 and 20 per year, which is a minuscule amount when you think in terms that the country has over 350 million people. That's a that is a very minor problem to be constantly scared about. On the same note, neither of us have kids, so we'd probably feel differently if we did.
Yeah, maybe. I kind of I started noticing after I was reading this that like the kids in my neighborhood don't really play outside. Like I never see, well, okay, I do see kids sometimes play in these like bouncy things. There's this like family down the street that gets these like bouncy houses and like inflatable pools, but they're always supervised. It's never like unsupervised play. No kids ride their bikes. I know there's kids in certain houses because I see them like in cars when they're driving by, but I like never see them outside playing in the neighborhood. It is kind of strange.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I felt like in the summer, like, mom and dad would be away and we just entertain ourselves throughout the day. Like we just go out and, we play in the yard or go play with friends. And
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, you're right.
almost from like 9 a.m. to like dinner time, like every
Right.
day.
Yeah. It's like, and then we'd get home and then mom and dad would be like, "Oh, what'd you do today?" And it's like we'd tell them.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think I definitely didn't. I mean, it's sort of harder. It's hard for me to relate now because I'm in an apartment. I don't
Hmm.
really see a lot of kids playing in my apartment complex. So I'm also at work. But when I was in Nashville, uh, the house next to me, I would say, ran an illegal daycare,
Okay.
and there would be a lot of little kids running around my block and street, and occasionally through my yard. So there was some. I think that was more just because the owners were a little, you know, negligent, but it is what it is. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think that also brought up, he talks about in the book where some parents got arrested because they weren't home.
Yeah, that was in Florida.
Yeah, they weren't home when their kid got dropped off from school or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, the kid was like shooting hoops the in the like on their like personal driveway for like I think it was only like 90
30
minutes.
minutes.
So,
Oh
so,
yeah,
so,
90.
something that did not really sound like that long.
Or the example where the 11-year-old who wanted to stay in the car, uh, someone called social services and those parents had to go take parenting classes, uh, which
Yeah,
is funny because those are two things I distinctly remember. I remember just not wanting to go into a store with mom many times and just being like, I'm going to sit in the car and read. And I remember just sitting in our driveway shooting baskets.
yeah.
So I think it's insane to think that mom and dad should be arrested for that. I mean, it's ridiculous.
And now they're having to make laws to like counteract this, saying like, oh, it's okay if you have, unsupervised play for your kids. I think
Yeah.
I was seeing that like in Utah.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
an actual law now saying like, okay, we're gonna, allow, you know, the kids to be kids.
But okay, so I think I think where I lost my train of thought was the point is that crime has progressively gone down.
Mhm.
So it's, I guess mom and dad grew up in the 50s and 60s, and then crime rates have progressively gotten better going forward. So like, I mean, some of the stories dad told us seemed kind of crazy. Uh, like, yeah, like sort of wild, but yeah, those would never happen today. But it's like they did, and everything for the most part turned out okay. Like, so shouldn't the kids be allowed to do more or less what like the parents did to
Mhm.
grow up and develop? I mean, I guess I would say yes,
Yeah.
but so yeah.
So anything else you want to touch on or?
Well, I mean, we kind of talked on the decline of play, like the decline of free play there.
Mhm.
Uh, the last two, the last two that he had listed for how we got here were the bureaucracy of safetyism, which I think you sort of touched on, where you just have to. Everyone wants to cover themselves, so if they can get, if you can get sued, like it's way easier to just, instead of doing what you think is necessarily right, you just protect yourself
Yeah.
and allow the kid to be right, which I think sort of sad.
Yeah.
And then the last one he writes is The Quest for Justice, which is I sort of thought was sort of interesting. Do you know who Douglas Murray is?
No.
Okay, so Douglas Murray is he's an English writer and like journalist, and sort of tied into a little bit of this book. But he was talking about in terms of like social justice that like everyone wants to feel like they're standing up for like the little guy, right? Like
Hmm.
they're fighting the good fight to make things equal. But I don't know. Do you feel like we live for the most part in a relatively equal society? Like everyone's under the same rules, more or less?
I'd like to, I'd like to think so. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess if you compare it to the rest of the world, would you say more or less we do?
Yeah, I guess I would say that.
I would say that too. So like the point that he was making is that like everyone, well, I think Douglas Murray said it the best. He was like everyone wants to feel like they marched with like MLK and fought for justice, but most of those inequalities I think don't, or at least in terms of law, like the laws are all equal uh, as it's written. Like there are no racist or sexist laws really. So people are fighting for things that you're making a mountain out of a molehill trying to fight for some of these things that aren't really a big deal. And he tells this story about a knight that sort of goes on a quest to kill dragons, and he goes to this town and he slays a dragon and everyone cheers for him.
Hmm.
And then he keeps, and like he feels good because he got the gratification. So then
Uh-huh.
he keeps going to town, killing dragons, right? Fighting for the people, and everyone keeps cheering for him. But then soon, like he's killed all the dragons, and then he's down to killing bears, and then he's killing like deer, and
Okay.
pretty soon the knight is just standing in a field swinging his sword at air, saying like, look at me, I'm fighting for you, I'm fighting these things that don't exist. And that's kind of how I feel we've gone as a society to an extent. Like, I mean, I'm not saying like racism doesn't exist, but I don't think it's very prevalent. I think for the most part it's you know situated in a very, very small minority of the population. It is not, not a massive problem, at least in our country, and definitely compared on a global scale. I think we still are the most accepting country, more or less. So those were my thoughts. I don't
Cool.
know if you agree or
No,
disagree.
no, it's a cool story. It's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Um, any closing remarks?
I don't know. Do you have any ending thoughts? I guess.
I will do my darndest to raise my kids with as little screen time as possible, I think.
Yeah.
And I really like the quote, prepare the child for the road, not the road for the
Road for the
child.
child. Yeah, that was a good quote. He had another quote about just doing something, like doing things you're not passionate about for the sake of doing them is drudgery. And
Yeah.
that's how I felt about grad school. So that hit home.
That
Not
was that was
not
kind of that was kind of that actually was kind of interesting because yeah, because they talk about how grit is often misunderstood as like I think they called it like perseverance without passion.
Yeah, yeah.
And because like in the 50 Cent book, he was kind of saying like embrace the drudgery. And I thought that
To get to a level of mastery. Yeah,
yeah, so I
I've
thought it
said
was
it.
kind of interesting to like hear it kind of it, I mean, you would agree that, or would you agree that it was kind of portrayed as like a negative thing here?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting to see, like in the 50 Cent book, it said like you really need to like embrace that. Like
Well, I think the difference was, 50 is referring to something, he's referring to the drudgery of becoming a master, like, but you're still in his, because in his, like in that topic, he's like still passionate about what he's doing.
But I guess, well, maybe he's passionate about the end goal, but I don't think certain things he's really passionate per se. I don't know. I kind of I was thinking about that though.
Because I got the impression when I was reading this was he was just talking about you're doing something that you don't really care about, but you're just persevering through it. While in 50's point, I felt like he was talking about, you know, if you care about something to become great at it, you have to push through, a point of drudgery, like a point of just awfulness to become truly great at it, to get that end goal. I guess that was how I interpreted it.
Okay. Because it almost sounded like you basically shouldn't push past that stuff. It like how I was reading this book. You saying don't do that.
Yeah, I think if you truly, I think what he was trying to say is if you truly don't like it, you shouldn't. Uh, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not sure. I have to
Yeah.
think about it.
All right. All right. Well, I guess with that said, please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendation, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. I'm Alex Olwell, and with me as always is my brother Jack Olwell. Jack, I think it's been a good episode. I enjoyed the book. I hope you liked it too. Do you know what the next book that the two of us will be doing together is?
um, hmm, that's Alistair Humphreys. I don't want to get the title wrong. Is it My Midsummer Morning? I believe.
Yeah, I believe it's My Midsummer Morning.
Yeah. So stay tuned, and it should be quite the adventure.
Yeah. Have you started reading it?
I have not.
Yeah, I'm about 100 pages in.
This was a book that I'm like almost 100% positive that I ordered, I received, and now I've mislocated it, or misplaced it, and it's nowhere to be seen. So I'm gonna have to order it again.
Okay.
But okay, Ali Bear,
All righty.
take care.
All right.